Bava Metziah Daf test. We're holding the east of Mesiv Mesefel. The east of Mesiv, the Mesefel, that those who raise a shaila to the opinion that what can be clean an animal by sitting on it in a riding position from the later clause of the statement of the first time in the Brisa. B'mida zaykena. They acquire the animal in that manner. B'mida zulmutimai. The phrase in that manner, what does it come to exclude? La'adam uti rochuv does not come to exclude one who sits in a riding position on the animal. Or it says like, it's stated to exclude the opposite cases. When it drives a camel or pulls a donkey, it does not acquire the animal. If so, Hainu Rabbi Yehuda, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. It's a practical difference between them with regard to one manner of acquisition in which one does not acquire an animal. Ista Amri Meshicha B'Chamar. Some say by pulling a donkey does not acquire it. Vegadamri Anaga Begamo. And some say that by driving a camel one does not acquire it. Toshma Megarai from a Bryce that one can acquire an animal by sitting on it in a riding position. If a person is sitting in a riding position on a donkey, another person is holding the reins. This one, the one sitting on the donkey acquires the donkey, and the one who is holding the reins acquires the reins. Where from here, the person who sits in a riding position on an animal acquires it. Here too, talking about one who is not only sitting on the donkey, but who is also driving it with his feet by squeezing or kicking it. Ask the one who is sitting should acquire part of the reins too. The fact that he does not acquire the reins is mashma that his acquisition of the donkey is imperfect, which would not be the case of if you were driving. So Mar says, so say that this one acquires the donkey and half of the reins, and that one acquires half of the reins. So it says, granted, the one sitting on the donkey acquires half of the reins, because a mentally competent person, the one holding the reins, has lifted it for him. But in what manner does one holding the reins acquire half the reins? So where it says, say that the one sitting on the donkey acquires the donkey and almost the entire reins, and the one who's holding the reins acquires only part of the reins that is actually held in the hand. Where it says, what does this mean? If you say a lifting a found item on behalf of another, the other person acquires it, so person acquires. So the statement applies only in a case where one lifts an item with a kavanah that another person will acquire it. This person who's holding the reins, so lifting it with them with the intention of acquiring it for himself, since he himself does not acquire them, how can he acquire it for others? So when Rashi says, this one who is sitting on the donkey and driving it acquires the donkey and its halter, which is attached to its head. That one who is holding the reins acquires only part that is held in the hand. The rest, neither this nor that one is acquired. Rav Omer says, actually, it says he taught because he can detach them to the donkey and bring them towards himself. Since he's able to pull the reins into his possession, they're considered as even though he does not lift them. Even though he doesn't lift them. It says, this statement of Ravo is a mistake. If you don't see, if you're going to accept Ravo's opinion, that will result in an incorrect halacha. Why? Because case of a garment, half of which was lying on the ground and half which was lying on the pillar. One came. So what happened was like this. There was a garment, half of which was lying on the ground and half of which was lying on the pillar. One came and lifted the half of it that was on the ground off the ground. Another person came and lifted another half of it off the pillar. So in that case, should one rule that the first one acquires the garment and the other person doesn't? Since the first one was able to detach it from the pillar and bring the entire garment towards him. It must be that's a mistake. In any event, the question of whether one can acquire an animal by sitting on it in the right position remains unresolved. The Shema come in here, another proof. One sits in an animal in the field or leads an animal in the city, he acquires it. This proves that one can acquire an animal by sitting it. So the Gemara says, here too, it's a reference to one who leads, drives the animal with his feet. This is the same as leading. So today, there are two types of leading. This is so Rachel my time like what is the reason that one who sits on an animal in the city does not acquire it? Rav Kana says because people do not normally run in the city. Other Rav Rav Kana but I want to ask you a question. If it's so that by means of unusual action one cannot affect the acquisition, it be arnaki b'Shabbos. First, lifted a wallet that he found on Shabbos. It's not the normal way to lift a person Shabbos because it's muksa. You're going to see it's not kaina. Rather, what he did. And he acquires the person. Here too, if a person sat on an animal in the city, what he did, and he acquires the animal. And rather, the Bryce is not referring to the case of a found animal, which one can acquire to keep him visiting in the city, than with the case of buying and selling an animal. Where the seller says to the buyer, acquire the animal the way that people normally acquire the animal. Therefore, the buyer cannot acquire it in the city by sitting on it. And if he rides it in Rosh Hashanah, he acquires it. And if he's a Adam Chashav, he's kind of Yishahi. And if the buyer is a woman, she acquires the animal. And if the buyer is a person who rides where others do not, he does not acquire it. He does require it. A person who says to another, if he wants to sell Kolel, pull this animal in order to acquire the vessels that are upon it. So the question is, can the buyer acquire the vessels by pulling the animal? So before discussing the question, the Gemara clarifies the issue. The guy tells him, in order that you acquire the Kolel, how can the buyer acquire it? Does he say to him, acquire the vessels? Rather, pull the animal and thereby acquire the vessels that are upon it. What's the halacha? Is pulling the animal effective in order to acquire the vessels upon it or not? Whatever of it says, if he said to him, acquire the animal and acquire the Kolel, Mikalni Kelim, does the buyer acquire the Kelim? Although one can acquire an item by having it placed in a courtyard, once the animal is equivalent to the courtyard, it's considered like a mobile courtyard. A mobile courtyard does not take effect. If you say that the animal can function as a chutzner when it's standing, anything that does not affect acquisition when moving also does not affect acquisition when it is standing or sitting. Where it says the hilchos of the halacha is that the buyer can acquire keli by having them placed in the animal's back only when the animal is bound. In that circumstances, when the buyer acquires the animal, it assumes the legal status of the chutzner and also acquires items that are placed upon the animal. Amru later Papa Rav He told him, Elamata. This is so in Malach Besvina, the case where one was sailing on a boat. Kofsu dogam enough to take a svina, and the fish jumped and fell into the boat. Is the boat also considered a mobile courtyard and therefore does not require the fish? A boat is not considered a mobile courtyard, as the boat itself sits idle. It's the water that moves it. Well, they revealed Ravashi, he saw that in Elamata, just to say that one does not acquire items that are placed in a chutzim malechas. If a woman was walking in the public domain, her husband threw a get into her lap, onto a person, or into her basket that she was carrying on her head, her too is she not divorced because the basket was moving? Like kalta mirich naichi. Said her basket is not considered a mobile courtyard, as it sits idle. As she walks beneath it. Next Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if a person was riding an animal, Bava Metziah, and he saw last time a Metziah. He told him, Tznali, give it to me. Not the Omar. If the guy took it and said, Ani zachisi bo, I've acquired it for myself. Zacha bo. The thing is, he has acquired it by means of Hagabah, even though he did not see it first. In Mishnah's Dalai, but if after giving it to the one riding the animal, he said, if he said, really, I acquired it for myself, he said nothing. The rider keeps the item. Ta'an also lived in a Mishnah there, a person who was gleaned the produce in the corner of the fields, or Amar, and said, this is for a certain poor person. Eliezer says, he acquired it for the poor person. You should give it to the first poor person that he encounters. Machlekes is in a case the pay was gleaned by a rich person who was not entitled to take pay from himself on behalf of a poor person. The Rabbi Eliezer holds if he wants, he can renounce ownership of his property and he would then be poor. And then pay would be suitable for him. So now it's considered potentially suitable for him even though he is wealthy. And since he could acquire for himself, he could acquire for his poor friend. But we could say one migich, therefore a wealthy person cannot acquire pay for a poor person. But in the case where the pay was gleaned by a poor person on behalf of another poor person, everyone agrees that he acquires on behalf of another person to be the Zechel Nafshei. Since he can acquire for himself, he can acquire on behalf of another person as well. Nachman said to Ula, but shouldn't the master say that the machlekes is even the case where the pay was gleaned, money machlekes by a poor person, because everyone is considered a poor person with regards to a found item. Everyone has the right to acquire an item, just as a poor person is entitled to pay out. And we learned in the Mishnah, if one was riding an animal and saw a found item and said to another person, give it to me, not the Lamar, he says, if you see the Machalikas is per person, Mari, whose opinion is the Mishnah and Rabbani. The numbers Bashar on the Machalikas of Manan the Rackle Zacha, later, but one of later below. So, where it says, the Mishnah is referred to a case where one lifting the item said, I intended to acquire the item for myself at the outset. I never had Kabbalah to acquire it on behalf of another of the rider. So, it says, I'm going to start with the Tani Sefer Mishnah, so Tchila was Sefer Damali, Pshita, I forgot the later Tchila. Tchila Kamar, Allah must be a Kamashman, the Reisha Dama Tchila. The other of Nachman will tell you Tana Sefer the Gleir Reisha, that they taught this phrase, the last clause in the Mishnah, in order to shed light on the first clause. Sefer Dama Tchila, Reisha Dama Tchila. The Sefer is at the outset, and the Reisha is not.